Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll probably have a few more people trickle in as we get going, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if you are attending, appreciate you guys hopping on to our webinar today, integrating AI into business operations. Our objective is to really focus on how your organization can use AI. Full disclosure, we speak at conferences and we do different things like that quite a bit, but this is our first foray into the webinar realm with this specific topic. So after we're done today, we're going to be sending out a survey to you. Would love to have your feedback on how we did, what we could improve on, so that we can use it to evolve if we're going to continue to do these events, if people find any value in them, right? So I'd like to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Cade Brewster. I'm the founder of Brewster Consulting Group. My background, I grew up in banking and financial services. So when I worked in banking and financial services, I managed both process improvement teams. So I'm a certified Six Sigma black belt, as well as reporting and analytics, data governance, enterprise data warehousing, kind of everything in that realm. So I had both of those under my responsibility. And then about 4 years ago, I quit and started my own company. Since then, we've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of different companies on process engineering, project management, data, enterprise data architecture, reporting and analytics in a lot of those different areas. And so we've got to have a lot of real world experience with businesses in a lot of different industries and how they run and operate every day. And because it's relevant to this specific conversation, I am a daily AI user. I use some of the new AI tools that are out there every single day. I find them to be extremely valuable, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So, um, we resisted talking about AI for a very long time. Specifically, I resisted talking about AI for a very long time. We didn't start to do it until very recently. And the reason why we resisted talking about AI for a long time was A, it's such a buzzword. It's such a popular concept on there. You can't scroll through LinkedIn without seeing so many posts about AI. There's a lot of kind of grifters in the space who are using AI as a buzzword to try to sell business and get business from that. And you guys are probably thinking, well, yeah, that's exactly how you got me into this webinar today. And that's true to some extent, but that's one of the reasons why we resisted talking about it for a long time, right? Like we just didn't want to be in that crowd who's trying to take advantage of the latest buzzword. But we kind of changed our tune recently and started talking about it for a few reasons. One is because it's impossible to have meaningful conversations with clients and prospective clients without it coming up anymore. It constantly comes up in conversation. Hey, could we use AI to do this? Can we apply AI here? Can we do this thing or that thing, right? So it's a really common thing that comes up in conversation now. And so we decided for that reason, we had to start talking about it. Another core reason that we decided that we needed to start talking about AI and specifically in business operations is because I believe, and I could be wrong about this is my personal belief, but I believe that we're going to see a fundamental change in businesses over the next 5 to 10 years. And one that we haven't seen really since the internet first started to come out, right? In this slide, I have a screenshot from an email that leaked online. This is obviously a Twitter or X screenshot, but it's from the CEO of Fiverr. And he says essentially, the unpleasant truth is AI is coming for your jobs. In fact, it's coming for his job as well. And he sent that to his entire team. It linked online, and it's been kind of making waves on the internet. But I agree with that. I think AI is coming for most of our jobs, at least in their current form. It's not ready to do it yet in most instances, and it's not ready to take over it immediately. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see significant shifts in how business, specifically specific processes and outcomes inside of businesses are driven. And because of that, there's a need for real guidance to help organizations navigate this evolving environment, to help organizations understand how they can actually apply AI to their day-to-day in a way that's going to drive value for their business, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we decided to start talking about it. And kind of the final revelation that made us think, okay, we probably should really start talking about this, besides just that belief in the change, and also seeing so many conversations kind of naturally arise with clients about the topic, is I was speaking at a conference in September in Nashville, and I think I had like the 1 o'clock time slot, which is awesome because it was right after lunch. You know, everybody just had a big free lunch, and then I was speaking at 1. But I was speaking at a conference for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers, and right after me, the guy who is the head of the data science AI machine learning program at Vanderbilt was the speaker, and so I stayed after my talk. To listen to his talk, and it was really good, right? I don't remember the gentleman's name, otherwise I would share it, but it was very informative. But what I found really interesting about his talk is that he was trying to help business operators understand how they could integrate specific AI tools into their day to day, right? And he used Claude to build a Power BI dashboard, which, if you know anything about what we do, which you might not know a lot, but we build a ton of Power BI dashboards. We do analytics for a lot of different companies. And he demonstrated how somebody could use Claude to instruct them on how to build a dashboard in Power BI. And I found it interesting because I had a couple thoughts. One, it was a good talk. I'm not at all knocking the talk, but two, um, he gave essentially the same exact talk I would have given if I was asked to give a presentation on that at the conference. That wasn't what I was talking about, but if it was, then I would have given pretty much that exact same presentation. And it kind of hit me that, like, this gentleman who runs the data science AI program at Vanderbilt, certainly very prestigious university, certainly knows more about the nuance and intricacies of the model and how to develop them than I do. I'm not claiming that I have an equal level of knowledge on actual model creation or development as what this gentleman did. But what I realized is that when it comes to applying these tools into business operations, it's such a new and rapidly evolving space that there isn't a ton of people who have just 10 years of experience in this specific subject, right? Because unless you've worked at the Googles and Apples of the world and have been doing it for a while, this is such new and rapidly evolving technology that even the experts on the models themselves are still learning and trying to figure out how exactly this technology integrates into day-to-day business operations in the most effective manner. And so that was kind of the final thing where we thought, we really need to start focusing on this. We need to start talking about this. We need to be able to have intelligent conversations with prospects about how they integrate this technology into their operations. And so we started to talk about it. And I think one of the dangers of AI, and for the record, these two pictures, they're just kind of pictures, but I made these. The one on the left was made with Midjourney 7, and the one on the right was made with ChatGPT's image generation, just to kind of sprinkle in some AI created material into this presentation. But the dangers of AI right now, and like I said, I love the technology. I use it every day. I'm an enormous proponent of it. But the danger of AI when it comes to businesses right now is that it is that flash, it is that buzzword, and you can get into an instance where you have all flash and no substance. I was talking to a sales engineer for a client of ours that is a SaaS technology company. Um, so at a very simple level, the job of a sales engineer in that position is to try to attract more users to the platform, right? And it's a business to business SaaS company, so like there's a little bit of nuance in their sales cycle, right? But the ultimate goal is to attract users to their company. And he was telling me how excited he was. He's been working with Claude to build a chatbot for the history of their organization, where any employee could dive in there and chat back and forth with this chatbot and learn about their organization and kind of their journey and details about their product. And it's really interesting. It's really cool. But I teased out a couple of questions with him, and I asked, how much time did you spend on this? And his answer was, I forget the exact number, but he'd spent like 40 or 50 hours of time just like working through the development of this AI chatbot. And then we started to talk about it, and my curiosity was, how is this going to help you get more users onto your platform, right? And he didn't have a good answer for that. That encapsulates a lot of what happens with AI. It's not that the technology isn't valuable or that there aren't value add use cases. It's that many people get caught up with the wow, the cool factor, and they don't break it down to the actual use cases that will help drive value for their organization. So they're investing in hype without a legitimate application for the technology. And so when we think about, and our objective with this session today is to give you guys a framework through which to evaluate and think about integrating AI into your business operations, and B, to give some real world examples in AI tech that's out there that might be useful to you, that you can walk away with, right? And so hopefully you're going to find value in that. And when you start to think about incorporating AI into your business operations, we think about it in terms of maturity, right? To have different levels of application, you have to have a certain level of organizational maturity, right? You need to make sure that your people, your processes, your data, and your tech stack, and your culture are all aligned in the support and integration of AI into your operations. You want to understand the most important processes inside of your organization so that you have legitimate use cases for the application of that technology. And you want to evaluate key processes to determine their AI readiness and how mature they are, right? And so the way that we facilitate that process is we've come up with a framework that we've coined the AI maturity model, which I'm going to share with you in just a moment, to help conceptualize and understand, okay, if these are the things that we do as an organization that are most important, this is where we sit from an organizational perspective. Because if you want to get value out of AI, you have to have those specific granular use cases to apply the technology, right? So we have a saying that we use a lot with clients, and that's a macro level organization is the sum of its micro level parts. And so what we mean by that is if we're looking at an organization and we're talking about customer satisfaction rate, the question is, why do we care about customer satisfaction rate? Well, in theory, we might care about it because more satisfied customer leads to better customer retention, which in turn leads to more revenue. And at the top of the house, right, that's ultimately what we care about, is how can we make more money with this particular point of interest, right? So we think about, how do we measure customer satisfaction? Well, Net Promoter Score, NPS, is a pretty common metric that's used in a lot of areas for measuring customer satisfaction. So let's say that we want to move our NPS from 6.0 to 8.0 because we believe that that lift in NPS is going to have a corresponding lift in revenue. So how do we break down customer satisfaction? Because if you tell somebody on your team, hey, go improve customer satisfaction, that's a really difficult thing to do because there's too many underlying components. So we have to go to the next level of granularity. And so what is a part of customer satisfaction? Well, let's say that you make a physical product and you have to deliver it to a client, right? So on-time delivery is probably a big component. Your pricing is probably a big component. Your order simplicity, your staff friendliness, those are all components that feed into customer satisfaction. But if you really want to move the needle on one of those, it's really difficult to say, okay, go fix on-time delivery and be able to truly improve it at that level. So if you want to focus on on-time delivery, let's say you want to move it from 75% to 90%, then you have to dive another level deeper, right? You have to get into what are the things that impact on-time delivery. And so in this example, we might say that our shipping processes, our sales process, and our inventory management, those are the things that actually impact on-time delivery, right? These are the things that we can affect that in turn, we believe by increasing on-time delivery, will increase our NPS, meaning we increase customer satisfaction, which means we increase customer retention, which leads to more revenue, right? You can't usually just go out and say, we're going to increase revenue or we're going to decrease expense. Instead, you have to work your way down to the granular or the micro level processes that you can truly influence or change. That's going to lead to the corresponding impact at the top of the house that you want to have, right? And so that example is one of the core things about AI that I think is important when you're trying to understand how you can apply it effectively inside of your organization, right? This chart right here is just a simple graphic that we put together, and every business is different. You probably have some things that aren't on here, but in general, most organizations have to think about strategy. What's their vision and mission? What's their market position? What's their strategic objectives, etc. Once you have a defined strategy and a defined product or service catalog, then you have sales. You got to focus on sales, your go-to-market, lead generation, your actual sales process. If you sell successfully, you have customer onboarding. You have fulfillment. That could be delivery of services or a physical product. Then you have customer offboarding. If you do those things effectively, you have to worry about customer management and retention. If you grow or you're continuing to grow, you have to worry about hiring, onboarding, performance, offboarding. And then kind of parallel to all of those, you have finance. And inside of all of that, you have technology enablement, right? IT isn't a department on this particular chart because IT doesn't really exist as a function, as in a business operations functions. Instead, it exists because you're supposed to layer technology across all of these other areas in order to enable them, right? And so the reason why I use that kind of chart on the last page to illustrate the example of going granular, and the reason that I use this chart to kind of break down typical areas, departments, processes, however you want to phrase it. But the reason why I use this to illustrate what you often see inside of an organization is because it's important when we get to the next slide, which is our process, or which is our AI maturity framework. It's important to be thinking about core functions, right? Because when we move on to this, this is intended to be viewed through the lens of thinking about the most important processes that you guys do as an organization, because you have to get to that level of granularity where you have a legitimate use case that you can apply AI to, right? And so I'm going to walk through this. I know there's a lot of information on the screen. We have a QA feature as well as the chat itself. So I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on that. But Ben, if I miss any questions and you need to hop off mute and tell me to check them, just let me know. But if you have any questions, I know there's a lot of information, so please drop any questions as we go through it. First of all, you'll notice in every box there are 3 colors. So starting from the left, this lightest color of green is what we call operational maturity. So these are operational activities that you would complete to kind of advance up in maturity of your operations. In the middle, we have AI capabilities, meaning at this stage in an operational maturity level, you could use these capabilities to impact the processes that you're focused on, right? And then in the far right, the darkest green, we have AI use cases, the actual use cases that you should use to apply AI at this particular level of maturity. So there's 8 levels, obviously starting at 1, going up to 8, and they're broken into essentially 5 sections. The first 4 levels are what we call AI foundation. Level 5, AI data preparation. Level 6, automation. Level 7, AI vendor replacement. And level 8, an AI workforce. So the way that we conceptualize this is you might pick a key process. Let's say invoicing, because it's a pretty simple one to conceptualize, right? So you have an invoicing process in all likelihood. Inside of that process, you would think, where are we on this journey, right? And the reason why we frame it like this is because if you want to advance in maturity, if you want to find success inside of actually applying AI to processes, there's a certain level of foundational work that you have to do before you move beyond just ad hoc application or certain business stakeholders leveraging AI applications, right? Because that's going to be the most common way that you apply the technology early on in that maturity journey, right? And so levels 1 through 5 are about doing things like clearly defining process ownership, creating process maps to understand how your process operates. Why? Well, because if you want to automate a process leveraging AI, it's going to be really difficult to do if you don't actually understand how it really happens and what the logic, the business logic driving that process is, right? And then as you evolve, defining KPIs, building SOPs, building a data dictionary, right? You're trying to build all of those foundational elements so that you can start to advance the maturity level of your business operations. And in turn, you can start to lay a foundation for successful application of AI. That doesn't mean that during these phases of maturity, you don't use AI. It's just that as you see on this far right side, most of the AI use cases are ad hoc, which means that a business user who's doing process maps might use an AI tool to help them create process maps, right? An AI user who's creating SOPs might use an AI tool to help create those SOPs, right? So you can still expand the capabilities of the people doing this work using AI, but most of it is going to be ad hoc usage, right? And then there will be some instances where you might have what we call tactical low budget AI solutions. And this is like, Scribe, which is a kind of an AI driven SOP tool. You might use something like that, and it's got $20, $30 a month subscription cost. It's low budget. It's used by a single or a couple users as kind of ad hoc. You're using that to expand the capabilities of your team to complete some of this work. But in and of itself, it's not an enterprise wide AI initiative, right? But you do all of this work to lay a foundation, because if you want to move into more advanced use cases, you have to make that decision around level 5, which is what we call AI data preparation, right? So if you want to move into more advanced use cases of AI, you have to have clean, accurate, structured data that you can integrate with whatever AI tools, whatever applications you're wanting to do, but you have to have a data architecture and a data structure that supports that initiative, right? And so at this level, once you've kind of laid that foundation and identified some of the specific use cases, this is where you have to start to focus on your data architecture. This is where you have to start to understand what those more advanced use cases are so that you can build a data architecture that specifically supports what you're trying to accomplish. So at this phase in the process, you might use AI to augment technical skills. So maybe your developer team, if you're building like a data architecture to support this, could use an engine like Cursor or something like that to help augment their talent, right? You can use it in different ways. Most of the application is still going to be ad hoc usage, but you start to integrate some tactical AI solutions, and you start to integrate some augmentation with your tech talent beyond individual kind of operational level users at this point. But this is the point where, as an organization, you really have to make a conscious decision to invest in your data architecture and your structures so that you can pursue more advanced use cases. A lot of organizations a lot of organizations fail in AI projects. I forget the exact number, but McKinsey had an article pretty recently, and it was something stupid like 90% of Gen AI projects are going to fail in 2025. And a lot of that has to do with data structures, availabilities, proper data architecture to support these initiatives, right? People get caught up. It goes back to the dangers of AI, right? But people get caught up in the excitement, in the flash of the technology, and they jump off the deep end saying we're going to do AI, we're going to build all of this cool stuff like autonomous AI agents that can talk to our customers, but they don't actually have like a data architecture or structure, or even in some instances accurate, reliable data that they can build a connection with those AI engines to build like those AI agents, right? And so you have to really make the decision that you're going to invest in that data architecture if you want to be able to take advantage of those capabilities. And then from there, once you've made that investment, I did see a question pop up. Joy, yeah, Joy, we're going to send the slides out along with the survey. So tell us how we did, tell us how we can improve, please. But yeah, we'll absolutely send the slides out. Sorry, I have the attention span of a small child, so it's easy for me to get distracted. But we, once you've built that foundation level and you have invested in data architecture a little bit, now you've prepared yourself to move into some of those more advanced use cases, right? And the first step is like true automation, being able to automate specific processes, specific targeted processes, like say an invoicing process, leveraging AI because now you have an integrated environment where maybe you get your data from your CRM and from NetSuite and from whatever you use to manage contracts, maybe, whatever, like you can bring all of those things together in an intelligent manner because of your data architecture, and then automate an actual process, like say, like an invoicing process or something like that, right? And then from there, level 7, AI vendor replacement. So, you know, I said earlier, we build a lot of Power BI dashboards, right? We do. And then there's a lot of demand for that right now. But I don't think for a second that in 10 years, we're still going to be building a lot of Power BI dashboards for people, right? Like that is going to evolve. It's not there yet, but eventually, from like, say, an analytics perspective, the technology behind AI is going to outpace what we're actually doing in that area, and vendors are going to start being replaced, right? And it'll be on them to adapt and change. But you're going to be able, maybe you've got an outsourced marketing team, maybe you've got a fractional CFO, right? Maybe you have people who run ads for you and you pay them as a vendor. As you get up that AI maturity scale, you're going to come to instances where you can eliminate some of those vendors because you can replace their functionality with just a little bit of oversight or augmentation from your own staff, but using AI primarily to deliver what they've been doing for you, right? And then that final highest level, kind of the holy grail that everyone talks about doing, but there's a lot of work to mature that goes into getting to that level, is an AI workforce, right? And that's autonomous AI systems or agents, right? Like actual, whether that's a chatbot on your website, whether that's a full customer service agent, whether that's a contact center that has an interactive agent that actually answers the phones on their behalf, right? Having that actual autonomous AI employees that will do that work. There's a lot of companies out there that are kind of advertising this already, saying they can do it. Um, to some extent, in a limited capacity, maybe they can, right? But in most instances, it's not ready because it's a limitation of your own data, right? Think about when you onboard a new employee, how long it takes them to get comfortable with your customers, your processes, your business, the way that it runs, and all the data that you have, right? Well, you have to be able to have a structure where you can easily give that to, say, an LLM like a ChatGPT or a Claude, and be able to have it process all of that information effectively and respond to incoming messages if you want to build a chatbot, right? And it takes a lot of architecture and work to get to a point where that's actually realistic. And so most of these more advanced use cases are limited by the data architecture and the data structures that most organizations have in place right now, which is why we conceptualized it in this frame of a maturity model, right? So you can start using AI in a valuable manner immediately today. I use it every day, right? But in these early phases, it's going to be primarily ad hoc usage from specific business stakeholders to maybe automate small tasks, mostly expand their own capabilities, meaning making them faster, more productive, increasing their skill levels because they can solve problems that maybe they couldn't before, but it still kind of takes that user to facilitate that process. But as you work your way up the AI maturity model, you're going to have more and more advanced use cases that open up to you and give you the ability to really start to integrate them in even more ways, right? So I know this was a lot of information, and I honestly could spend a much longer talking about kind of the thought behind this and all the different details. We will send this out after it, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We have a little bit more content that I want to jump to though, so I'm going to move on from this particular slide. But this is the bulk of how we think about AI adoption, how we think about organizations properly maturing into AI adoption. And so this is the lens through which we evaluate most AI use cases that we're going to think about as we go through this process, right? So as we move on from here, when you think about executing with AI in a way that truly drives an ROI for your business, the most fundamental thing is you have to tie it to real business goals, right? Our invoicing process, I keep using that as an example, but our invoicing process is really manual. It's really confusing. Every contract is kind of nuanced and ad hoc in its own thing. And it takes, multiple controllers and multiple accounting personnel every month just to get all our invoices out. And we're probably leaving revenue on the table because we're missing some nuanced billing from some of our contracts, right? Like that's a real conversation I had recently with the company, and that's a great use case to try to chase after, because there's potentially money being left on the table. There's a lot of people's time being taken up for it, right? It's a real thing that has real ROI if you solve that problem. You have to have that to execute effectively with AI. Do not just wake up one day and say, we're going to do AI. Let's do AI. We want to bring AI in, and not have that specific thing. Instead, the thought process should be, we have this problem that we need to solve, and I think AI might be the right tool for it, right? And then if AI is the right tool for it, use it to solve the problem. But you should think of it through that lens of, what is this problem that we need to solve? And then that's your North Star as far as how you can execute with AI, right? Another thing to know about executing with AI right now is it's not ready to fully replace expertise, right? I can use AI to write a ton of code for, say, Power BI development that I'm doing, right? But it gets things wrong. And if I didn't know what I was looking at, then I wouldn't be able to correct and get the overarching thing right. So it might expand my capacity significantly, but it's not going to get it correct in a totally autonomous fashion. So it's not ready to fully replace expertise. A lot of full like app devs who use a tool like Cursor or Replit or something like that to build applications will tell you the same thing in kind of the development world. It's not ready to fully replace expertise. You still need to understand what you're looking at. You still need to have that expertise, but it can massively increase your productivity by doing a lot of the legwork on your behalf. Another thing that's important is you have to focus on culture and buy-in, right? Um, Give employees a sandbox to test. If you want to see increased productivity for this, you need to encourage your employees to use it. Sometimes there's a stigma in companies, right? And they're like, "Oh, you're using Chat GPT to help you do your job." Like that's a bad thing, right? Like that's well, you must not really know what you're doing, or yada yada yada. I don't really know what the reasons are, but there is a stigma in some organizations around that, like it's a negative. But the people who use this stuff are going to have a massive advantage over the next 5 years, right? So if you have a culture where people are really shy about using this technology, you're going to fall behind competitors that embrace it, because a competitor who sells the same thing of the same quality with the same staff size will massively outproduce you from a productivity perspective if all other things were equal, but they're using AI and you're not, right? That's just going to be a reality over the next 5 to 6 years. And so if you don't embrace it, you're going to fall behind. Um, Another thing that's important, understand, and we talked about this a second ago with the maturity model, but like, understand that most initial use cases are going to be augmentation and ad hoc. Augmentation meaning extending the productivity or skill set of your employees. Ad hoc being one-off scenarios, ad hoc small applications that you use to a specific end, right? Those things are going to be your initial use cases, but as you grow in maturity, those are going to get more and more advanced, right? Um, you need to start thinking about what you want to accomplish with AI in a couple years right now, right? Because as we talked about with the framework, and I'll jump back to this just a little bit, as you advance in maturity, right around here is when you have to make decisions about investment in data architecture and structure. And you need to know what you want to accomplish if you're going to make those investments, right? So you need to start focusing on future developments, future integrations, future AI use cases that in 2 years could drive tremendous value for your organization, because it's a journey to grow in maturity to get to a point where that's a reality, right? And you got to focus on data readiness along the way. Beyond that, a couple of use case frameworks to think about, right? Automation. If you have manual specific tasks, focus on combining RPA tools and AI for task automation. So automation is one major application. Augmentation, we've talked about that several times, right? But extending the capabilities of existing talent, leverage AI to make somebody more productive, to extend their knowledge base so that they can do things that they otherwise wouldn't know how to do. But with that augmentation, they can still do it. I know that sounds a little contradictory to what I said earlier about it doesn't replace full expertise. And maybe it is a little bit, but there's levels to it, right? You can't know anything about you can be a web developer who knows nothing about web development and then suddenly use Cursor to build a full stack functional application that you can ship to production. But you can be, say, a Power BI developer who's maybe not the most advanced, and you can extend your capabilities to the level of like an advanced Power BI developer, right? So there are kind of different applications there. You don't want to jump wholly out of your skill set, but you can massively increase your capabilities if you already have some level of skill set in a specific area. And then innovate. One of the ways that people don't talk about, but I think is really valuable, is leveraging AI to brainstorm, to innovate, to expand product features and service capabilities, right? Every business should always be evaluating their products or their services. How do they evolve them to match market demands, right? And using AI as an innovation tool to really help drive those can be extremely valuable to understanding your market, to making decisions about your product catalog and your product evolution, to making decisions on your go-to-market strategy, right? There's a lot of areas there where it can become extremely useful for you as a business leader. So I have several slides here that are full of examples, and I want to leave a little time for Q&A if there is any at the end of this. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. Like I said, we'll send out this deck. A point of interest, I used an AI application called Napkin, which is on a list we have here in a minute, to build all of these diagrams. And I did that just because I could have spent a lot of time making, a lot more detailed diagrams, but I basically just put my inputs on what I wanted it to look like, and it kicked these out. And I wanted to show you just as another example of some of the capabilities that you can use the AI tool for. But these are examples of real workflows that have been built to solve a specific problem in a variety of different kind of industries or applications, right? And I'll send this out and you can go through them in depth. But this first one, and the purpose of this segment, I guess you would call it, is I know we have people from a variety of different industries, types of business, different backgrounds, use different tech stacks. So it's hard to kind of cater to everybody, but I wanted to show some real examples of real use cases inside of business operations to start to prompt some of that thinking about how, using that maturity framework that we talked about, you could take that lens and start to evaluate some of your own business operations and where you might be able to apply this, right? So home services business, auto scheduling and cleanup pipeline, right? So this is an example where a customer submits a service request via a type form, and then Zapier goes out, grabs that request, hits the OpenAI API, which parses it into a JSON structure, creates a row in an Airtable using Zapier, and then hits the OpenAI API again to recommend the best time slot that's available. I'm not going to walk through every step in here, but you're starting to get the idea, right? This is an actual workflow where the entire auto scheduling and cleanup of the pipeline was automated, leveraging AI and leveraging OpenAI to intelligently classify and schedule home services appointments through this. There's obviously a trigger in here that would kick out exceptions to the process if a human really needed to look at what was going on with the specific scheduling, but it goes all the way down the workflow to tracking the payment inside of QuickBooks, right? Because a lot of these tools have integrations either out of the box or you can build them that allow you to make a really integrated environment to build these workflows. So this is a good example in the home services business of how you can fit those things together. There's another one over here on doing outreach via LinkedIn, right? Where you can use Sales Navigator to pull a list, use an application called Clay and Phantom Buster. Those are two different to really enrich your prospect portfolio. And then at the end, what you're going to do is create essentially a repository and then use Clay in tandem with the OpenAI API to craft copy for social media posts or outreach emails that's very, very specific to the customer profile that you pulled from that sales navigator list, right? Like this workflow right here shows exactly how to facilitate that. This one, we talked about invoicing, right? But this is an example of an invoicing one, right? Where it tracks billable hours and harvest, sends them to Expensify, Power Automate. So this would be an example in a Microsoft tech stack, is going to pull that new line item. OpenAI API is going to be used to categorize it. It's going to be stored in the Microsoft Dataverse. Then OpenAI is going to build, based on predetermined structure, the invoice draft, which will be routed through Microsoft Teams for approval, which is then the approval is going to be logged in the Dataverse. Power Automate is going to create the invoice in NetSuite. NetSuite will send the invoice and update the ledger. Stripe integrates and is used to collect payment. Power Automate then updates the payment status in NetSuite once it's collected, and OpenAI uses a template to generate a receipt and send to the customer, which is automated through Outlook using Power Automate. And then you have a Power BI dashboard that sits on top of it all to show revenue refreshes and your accounts receivable, right? This is an example of doing that same thing, but with the invoicing process, right? Like getting your environment to work together to automate a lot of these really, really manual tasks. A couple more examples: supply chain optimization using NetSuite and Power Automate. And then we have, I don't know if there's anybody in here who has a Shopify store, right? But building a Shopify smart cart chatbot, right? Where the idea behind this is you create a repository of similar products, so complementary SKUs of the product that somebody puts into their cart, and you have a little floating chat bot that floats on your Shopify store and says, hey, you've put XYZ in your cart. Customers who like this also like this, right? You all get it on Amazon and a lot of other stores that you go shop online. You get it on Netflix recommending TV shows. That same type of thing you can now set up on your own Shopify store yourself using a workflow like this, right? And these diagrams outline how this is. And then this last one, I added some color here just to show some differentiating and formatting that you can do with Napkin. Ben made fun of me for it, but that's okay. But this is an example of support triage, right? So customer support. So maybe you run a contact center or MSP or something like that, where you get a lot of customer tickets coming in that you're going to log inside a Zendesk or something like that, right? So this shows how that can be initiated, tracked. Tier 1 escalation can be handled and triaged through purely AI, and then escalated using Zendesk up to people, actual humans who might need to respond to an escalated request. And then the final one on the right over here, SaaS development, right? So another company that we talked to that's a SaaS company, they had their CTO talk to their developer team a few weeks ago, I think. And his message to them was just like, basically, like, you have to get on board because of what we've talked about, right? Which is that AI is now like, that's just like the bare minimum that is expected, right? It used to be, there was a lot of talent delineation with developers, and there still is, but AI is becoming so highly adopted that lower talent developers can now start to exceed or expand their capabilities to a point where they can beat senior developers if they're not augmenting their capabilities, right? And so in this one, this is set up where you create a user story in like Jira, and then you have a GitHub Cursor integration. Cursor is a tool that's used by a lot of developers to do it's primarily like predictive coding, so it'll predict what you're doing on there. But you can there's also like an agent where you can just kind of tell it to build something, and it'll build lines of code for you and test them. So this workflow demonstrates how like a developer could use this workflow to augment their process and be able to really expand their capabilities for development. Jason, I saw your question. Are you seeing pushback from the IT side of the business? I think definitely. I think it's weird, but you feel like they would be early adopters. I feel like there's two camps. I feel like there's a camp of AI people who are really excited. IT people who are really excited about AI, and so they really embrace kind of this change, and they think it's cool to see where it's going. And they also might, want to ship a lot of products or something, and so they see it as an expansion of their own capabilities. I think there's another camp where people feel like they worked for a long time to really build their developer skills, and it made them a highly compensated, highly sought after professional skill set, which now feels threatened by this emerging technology. And that's the side that I think there's a lot of pushback from. So I think it kind of falls into one of those two camps, but there's a lot of embracing it, but there's also a lot of pushback from the IT side. So it kind of just depends, I think, on the personality of that particular developer, or it goes back to the culture. A lot of it has to do with the culture of the development team and the organization that they're at, because if as a whole, like holistically, your organization kind of embraces it, then I think each individual developer is probably more likely to do so. But if not, then that probably makes it harder. So that would be my answer to that question. Um, so um, some tools to know. I saw a lot of note takers hop on here, so it seems like a lot of you have already discovered those, which is great. If you haven't, I advise note takers are great. We use Fireflies, but I think a lot of them are really solid. Napkin AI is what I use to create those diagrams. So if you want easy kind of visualization, infographic, diagram creation, um, Replit, I really like for creating kind of application prototypes. Cursor, I think is better from a pure dev perspective. Clay, customer profile enrichment, that's really more of a sales tool. Guide, training creation, it's really solid. Make, and then NAN. I'm I'm sure there's a way you're supposed to actually say that, and I got to be honest, I have no idea how you're supposed to say it. But if you just Google like NAN, you'll find it. Those are really solid like automation tools. And we put a bunch of others in here. I'm not going to I'm not going to go through each one of these, but obviously we'll send out the decks. So you'll get a list of them. We have a larger list. We have like over 100 that we have cataloged in kind of an AI tool repository, but we these are the ones that I wanted to share because I think you could start to play around with them and get some value. The only other thing I want to make sure I call out on these is C data. They actually just they announced, it was either yesterday or late last week, that they are launching MCP servers. And if you don't know what MCP is, it's Model Context Protocol. It's essentially a way to give a very simple explanation that we can go offline and dive in more depth if you want to, but like it's an easy way to connect like an LLM, like a Claude or a ChatGPT to your data specifically. And usually previously that the MCP concept was invented by Anthropic, which is who makes Claude, and they released it kind of last year, but a lot of people have embraced it for specific plugins to specific applications. But C data is more of like an ETL, like think like Talent Informatica type tool. But they actually released the ability for people to create their own MCP servers. So when we talk about data architecture, that type of capability can be really valuable in building a data architecture that'll actually interact, like get an LLM to interact like with your data effectively. So that's something of note. Now, context windows in the future and how those expand might have a lot of impact on how useful like MCP specifically is in the future, but right now it's a really valuable way to create a hopefully easier architecture that will allow you to start to interface a lot of your data with some of these tools. I didn't leave a ton of time, but I left a little bit. Are there any questions that I can answer that you guys want to bring up? We have about 6 minutes left. I can stay a few minutes over if you guys have questions, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But is there any questions that you guys want to share and or ask from that presentation? Was it helpful? I know you're on mute, so that's kind of a dumb question to ask, but like, I hope this was valuable. I felt like I was flying through the material. We could spend probably a full day workshop talking about it, but I wanted to put some thoughts, some frameworks, lenses out there for people to think about AI integration into their business. So do we have any questions that you guys would like me to cover in the last couple of minutes? I'm not seeing any. So if I'm not seeing any, if there are any, our contact information is in the deck. We'll send you the survey. by all means, feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you have. Um, yeah, thank you, Joy. Um, it's a really interesting time. I think, like I said, I think it's going to fundamentally change things over the next 5 to 10 years, and so it's a really interesting time to try to navigate. And we really like talking about it, right? So if you have any questions or anything that comes out, please don't hesitate to reach out. But really appreciate your time to join us today, and please let us know your feedback to this survey. Thank you very much.